Greetings and welcome to our lesson on the writing process. This is a more detailed lesson than what you've gone over so far, so let's get to it. Now, the writing process is a process for writing. All writers have a writing process. You have a writing process. I have a writing process. We all have writing processes if we write. The thing is, we want to make this writing process good and make it work for us. So if you look in a textbook, you'll find anywhere between 3 and 14 steps for a writing process. I know this because I had to do this study in grad school and I had to look at all these textbooks. So it was between 3 and 14 steps. All these steps can be boiled down to the 3 steps, the 3 main steps, and that's what we're going to go over. After you have the basic steps down, you can add to your writing process, take away from it, tweak it the way you need it to be for you, because your writing process is going to be your writing process. There are, though, parts of the writing process that I'm going to need to see as your teacher. So let's get to these things. I'm going to share the presentation with you and talk a little more in depth about it as we go through it. The writing process. So the 3 parts that we're going to go over are the pre-write, the write, and the rewrite. These are the technical terms for things, and we'll talk about what the terms that we actually use are. So the pre-write. The pre-write is also known as the brainstorming stage. This is where you're getting the thoughts out of your head and onto some paper. Thoughts out of your head and onto paper. That's basically what the pre-write is all about. I had a Six Sigma seminar, and the presenter explained something about having a notepad with you all the time, especially if you are in a career where you have to have ideas. He said that you should always have a notepad with you, or a PDA. Back then, smartphones were PDAs. So he said every time you have an idea, you take out your pad and you write down your idea on your pad. Then you stick it in your pocket. The reason for that is that the reason that we're getting that thought out of our head and onto some paper is so that when it comes time to actually do the thing, in our case, writing the essay, you don't have writer's block. It thwarts writer's block. It helps to get rid of it, because when you're writing the essay, you don't want to then have to come up with new ideas to write about. We're doing all this in the pre-write, but the brainstorming phase. Also, what he said was that if you write it down, you don't have to remember it. So by writing it down and putting it in your pocket, you don't have to keep it in your short-term memory. And to keep something in your short-term memory, you have to keep thinking about it over and over again. If you write it down, you don't have to keep thinking about it, and you allow your mind to think about next level things. So by doing a pre-write, we're going to try to get rid of writer's block. When you do your pre-write, I suggest doing it in about 7 minutes. Don't take more than 10 minutes to do a pre-write. Just concentrate, get the thoughts out of your head and onto paper right away. Then be done with it. Now there are different ways to do a pre-write. One is an outline, and an outline is what I do. I use dashes and dots and numbers and letters to make my outlines. And this right here is an outline. This one's using little bubbles, little dots. I'll make it, you can make it as detailed as you want it to be. You can write sentences in your, next to your dashes or dots. Sometimes I write a whole paragraph. It's, it's, it's my pre-write. That's how I do it. So you can do it yours how you want to do it. You can make a list. Just list the thoughts that come to mind, list what you have to do, list what you have to talk about. A mind map or a bubble map. This is an illustrative way of doing a pre-write. If you are a very illustrative person, artistic person, by all means, do a mind map, do a bubble map, draw a picture, paint a picture. It's up to you. I have two characters that wrote out their plans in illustrative ways from TV shows that I like to reference. One is from the TV show Oz, and it was a poet named Poet. And Poet, he didn't know how to write. So he wrote all his poetry in symbols. And when it was time to perform his poetry, he pulled out his little pad with all the symbols on it, and then he performed his poetry. No one else is able to read it, but that's how he was able to get his thoughts out. And another prison show, Prison Break, with Michael Scofield. He had a plan to get into prison in order to break his brother out of prison. And he gave himself a full body tattoo. And to everyone else, it just looked like a full body tattoo. Except for this one crazy guy, but of course, since the crazy guy was able to decipher it, they had to kill him off. But anyway, he had a full body tattoo. And in this full body tattoo were his plans to escape prison. I mean, and it was like blueprints and what he had to do at different times and stuff. But that illustrative way was the story that he was supposed to follow. So if you have to draw a picture, by all means, do that. Your pre-write is your pre-write. And we have a free write. Free writing is something that is mostly used by creative writers. It's when you give yourself a time limit, and for that time, you write. If you're writing with a pen or pencil and paper, then you put your pen on the paper, put your head down, and you just write for 10 minutes. And if you can't figure out what to write next, then you actually write, I can't figure out what to write next. I can't figure out what to write next. I don't know what to write next until that next thought comes. And then you write that next thought, but you don't stop writing. This is great. It's a great exercise if you find yourself procrastinating. If you're a procrastinator, you find yourself playing Fortnite or something and you have a paper due, then just tell yourself, after my character dies right here, for 10 minutes, just 10 minutes, I'm gonna free write. And then you just get it out the way. They say that if you do what you're supposed to do for just 15 minutes, the feeling of procrastination goes away because it'll feel like you're in the groove and you no longer are fighting against doing what you're supposed to do. So give yourself 10 to 15 minutes to get into the groove and get rid of that procrastination feeling. So here are some examples. Here's an outline example. This one's using letters. Boom, 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 boom. If you do an outline, you can do it however you want to do it. Here's a list. This person seems to be writing about animals. Animal kingdom, land animals, aquatic animals, all those types of animals. Just list them. Here's a mind map or a bubble chart. With this, the main idea of your whole paper, the main point, goes in a big bubble in the middle. And then you can draw little extensions off of it. And this will be a main point of your paper. Tools, methods used. This will be a main point. Where it occurs. This is a main point. Who does it? This is a main point. What is it? And then you can draw little extensions off of that one, and extensions off of that one, and extensions off of that one. It's up to you. And this is a free write. So here, you see this person is just talking about what they're doing right here, right now. And then as they go, they're just writing and just getting out what's on their mind, and the thoughts that come, the ideas that come about what they're supposed to be doing, they'll put in there. But the point is, you don't stop writing. Especially if you're a creative writer, you might want to try to do some free writing. It pulls you in to the creative process of creating ideas. It tends to get a lot of the thought junk out of the way first, and then it pulls you into the ideas that you should be creating. After the pre-write, we just went over the whole brainstorming phase. After the pre-write comes the write. The write is the technical term for the rough draft. So all the thoughts that we got out of our brainstorming phase, we're going to put into essay form. That's really all the rough draft is. It's your thoughts in essay form. I have here that you can handwrite or type your rough draft. I always handwrite my rough drafts and then I type them. That's because that extra split second that it takes to write something down by hand allows my mind to think of the next perfect line or the next perfect word, and it just flows for me. There are times though where my mind is just going too fast, and if I handwrite it, I'm just going to lose my thoughts, so I have to type. Depending on how you feel about getting your thoughts out or getting your thoughts into essay form, you might want to handwrite it, you might want to type it. But when you turn in your rough draft to me, it has to be typed. It has to be turned in on Blackboard. So either way, I tend to handwrite my stuff first. When you do your rough draft, don't worry about errors. Don't worry about putting in the perfect word or the perfect phrasing, because this is just a rough draft. You're going to write it over. And what I suggest that if you handwrite it, the suggestion works perfectly, because you just have the paper next to the computer or next to your screen, and you're just basically typing it over. But as you type it over, you're seeing your mistakes and you're correcting the mistakes or correcting the scratches that you put in there so that you can have a good rewrite. I don't suggest that you just open up your paper and make spot corrections. I suggest that you actually type it over. It's a good practice. It's like double checking your work. And when you actually type the stuff over, your mind will put in the right words for you. When I say this, I mean, when you do your rough draft, let's say you can't figure out what the perfect word is, you just put an underline there, or you put some dots or whatever you do to mark that you have to figure out what that word is. If you leave that paper alone for a while and then come back to it, your subconscious is still working on that puzzle, because our subconscious minds are all day, every day, while we're awake, while we're sleeping. The subconscious works on puzzles. Like it solves puzzles all the time, nonstop. That's what our dreams are. So even when you're not looking at your paper, your mind is searching your brain, searching the world for what that word is supposed to be. So when you come back to it, lo and behold, like magic, you're going to know what that word is. So writing your paper over is a great practice to do. And then we have the rewrite. The rewrite is your final draft, unless you do another rewrite, and then that'll be your final draft. Unless you do another rewrite, and that'll be your final draft. So you can do as many rewrites as you want, but the rewrite is the final draft. For our class, the rewrite should be your final draft must be typed, MLA format. It should be in Microsoft Word or PDF format so that Blackboard can recognize it and so that I can score it for you. And your paper should be as perfect as possible. Yeah, the final draft should be as perfect as possible. If you ever turn in something physically, like some physical paper, then it should not be wrinkled. It should not be crinkled. It shouldn't have stains on it. It shouldn't look like a rough draft at all. It should look like a polished, perfect paper. And that's because you don't want to be judged about your paper before it's even read. And of course, they say you shouldn't judge, but we judge all the time. So it's just reality. So make sure your final draft is as perfect as possible. And that's the writing process. The write, the pre-write, the write, and the rewrite. Do it, make it your own, love it. The end.